Hi, welcome to class. A few classroom reminders. The grading period ends this week. You have up until Friday. Please make sure you hit classwork and at the bottom, please notice the titles that I have put. So where it says 5-1 or 5.1 is the new grading period. Since this stuff is not due till Friday, it'll start a new grading period. So everything for this last grading period, if you're worried about your grade, is wherever you see this 4. Or if you use this Google checklist, this really maps out exactly what you need for my class to pass. It also breaks down the assignments with the YouTube videos and tells you what's worth the most points to the least. So if you get overwhelmed and feel like you can't do every assignment, at least try to do some of these mastery assignments to bring up your grade the most, because those are worth the most points. So you have until Friday to do that. So please make sure you turn in any work. Ask me for help if you need it. But this week, what we're learning about this week, I'm really excited. We're starting to learn about what is called Mesoamerica, which stands for any region of South America and a little bit of North America. So what I've done each week, I'm going to basically go over a slideshow that all you have to do is really listen to this. It's just to give you a little bit of background when I'm talking about these different civilizations. So this week is focusing on Mayans. Next week will be Aztecs, Incas. Eventually, I will post these in Google Classroom for you to look at, but for right now, it's just for you to view. So the Mayan civilization, when you hear this word, it's referring to South Mexico / Guatemala area or Honduras. Excuse me. They were a big civilization based on their geography. It was really based off of farming, and you're going to hear me say that a lot because all these civilizations are really based on farming. And Mayans were very much divided. So when I say Mayans, it wasn't like one city of Louisville. It was broken up into many different cities, and those different cities fought each other. So a lot of Mayan kingdoms did not get along. Their cities and temples are probably what's most famous. Aztecs had very similar temples. So a lot of people, when you see pictures or paintings, get them confused on whether or not they're Mayans or Aztecs, but Mayans were the ones that were probably the most famous for it. Chichen Itza is probably the most famous. It's one of the tallest pyramid in the world. So it is not, fun fact, Egypt. But these pyramids were built to honor their different gods. So many of their gods were based off of agriculture. They were polytheistic, meaning they believed in a lot. So similar to ancient Greece with things like Poseidon, the god of sea, they had very similar things. They're most famous for growing corn, beans, squash. They're also really famous for cocoa. So we have them to thank for coffee. We have them to thank for chocolate. A lot of people in classes have been telling me, like, oh, I have an arrowhead. What makes these unique, that in Native America and America, we have arrowheads. These are actually obsidian, which means it's dried up lava rocks. This is very important because A, this is extremely wealthy. Like, it's very expensive to own one of these back in the time period. And they were sharp. So they were a great weapon to use because it was harder for them to break. They did have a ruling class. Each Mayan kingdom looked a little bit different. But they had a priest, a king, they had a farmer group, a high ruler of some sort. This is a modern day photo of a Mayan ritual and some of the outfits they would wear. I do have to talk about, because everyone always is intrigued by it, they did have human sacrifices. Not as much as people think. Most of their sacrifices were animals. To be sacrificed as a human being, it was considered a great honor. And this is a famous painting of a human sacrifice. It was considered an honor, which I know is really hard for us to get past that. Of like, what? How could it be an honor? Back in the time period, it really was. But they did not have it as much as you would think. That it kind of got over embellished and glorified because when Spain comes over to take over, they wanted to villainize a lot of the Mayans and portray them as a bad group of people and say, oh, they kill people, when really they didn't. I'm sorry, they did a little bit, but not as much as you think. Some of their achievements, they did have hieroglyphics similar to Egypt where pictures stood for different things. So they had a great writing system. This is a picture of some of their writing system, very difficult to translate. Astronomy, they're most famous for their astronomy. At one point in 2012, if you're old enough to remember this, um, they had created a calendar, and a lot of people have superstitions that they predicted things for the future. Um, it's up to debate if they did or not, but their calendar in 2012 had ended, so people thought it was going to be the end of the world. Obviously, it was not. But their calendar represents the 365 days of the year, which is exactly what we use now. And it was based on the harvest system. So if you ever see this picture or painting, that is actually Mayan. It is a Mayan calendar. It is a Mayan calendar. Mathematics is their other huge accomplishment. You have them to thank in Miss Rumsey's class. They did have a symbol for zero. It was the first in history to ever use that concept. And this is a really cool picture of their different math system. They invented place values, which is our number system today. You see this a lot in movies, and these pictures don't do it justice. I've been able to see this in real life. These walls are like 15 feet up, and they can only use their legs and hips, where they have to try to get this ball through this little hoop. But what's cool about it is actually not the losing team. The winning team was actually sacrificed. So they did not play this as often, and different Mayan cities had different rituals for it. Some got sacrificed, some did not. It kind of just depended. But the end of the Mayan civilization, it's up for debate if they really ended, because going to Mexico myself, there's a lot of communities that consider themselves Mayans. They don't even consider themselves Mexican. They call themselves Mayans. But according to history, people say that they just magically disappeared. It's one of the world's great mysteries of the world that people can't figure out how they disappeared. Possible solutions is people think that they grew too fast and didn't have enough farmland. Some thought it was a drought, that they had dry weather causing, crops to fail. Some think it was just simple warfare, that they were died off during different types of warfare. But it's one of the great world mysteries. Some people think it was aliens. Nobody has really confirmed what really caused them to end. But that's the intro to Mayans. We obviously in class will spend more time going over the Mayans. So for today, what we did in class today, of what I want you to actually do, is this assignment called Geography Settle. So when you click on that, you will need this Google Doc and slideshow. So what you have to do is, please make sure you do the warm-up. I just don't have it on my screen. I'm sorry, I'm like misplacing my words. You have to answer this question, and it is really important. Try to really do these on your own. These slideshows are super easy compared to previous assignments. You're going to learn a lot more if you read it instead of just copying my screen. But this is a good chance for you to hit it pause if you need it. You're answering this question that, why did these four civilizations settle where they chose to settle? Okay, and please don't forget to answer the warm-up of what does it mean to settle to you. But looking at the slideshow, so we kind of read through this as a class, that the Mayan civilization, they were very unique. There's only 2 civilizations in the world that chose to live in a rainforest. And we kind of talked about in class why they would do that. So, excuse me. One reason could have been because they'd have a lot of access to natural resources, such as water, trees, food, like plants such as corn, squash, and animals, because you do need animals to kill them for meat. And then it also gives you protection, that living in a rainforest, because people are not going to want to travel through a rainforest. We then talked about Incas. So please do make sure you're referring to the slide. The Incas are most famous from Emperor's New Groove, if you've seen that movie, but living in the mountains. They were living in the area of Peru, which is very, very mountainous. The real reason was for religious purposes, that they wanted to be closer to the different gods, and to do that, you had to climb up a mountain. But it was also really for protection. A lot of it had to do with protection. Aztecs, you can watch this really cool 5-minute video clip by hitting play. I highly recommend it. But Aztecs lived closer to a lake. They ran out of land because they lived more northern part of Mexico, and they ran out of land. And most of that part of Mexico was very deserty. So they had to create what is called a floating garden. They didn't have enough land, so they made more land in this lake. They did it by boxing sticks to make mud, and in that mud they could grow things, creating more land. This system still exists even today. that people all around the world still use this concept. The video is a little misleading. I talked about this in class. They didn't just live in a lake. They did live in Mexico and ran out of land and then moved to the lake. But again, the access to water and more land is important. Mississippi, and it's really important you look at this, it doesn't mean literally the state of Mississippi. Mississippians are referring to Native Americans on the east hemisphere of America. And you can kind of look at this map of the different groups. So it's a bunch of different tribes like Iroquois, Shawnee, the Cherokee, a little bit of Cherokee in there. But what we learned from that one was the Mississippian tribes had to live by rivers or water. So that's kind of a theme that water is always essential. And they also needed trees and valleys for grass, to grow things, to farm, that you also need those things. Okay. So once we got done with this assignment, if you scroll back over to Google Classroom, we did FPT Geography Settle. This is what you have to do on your own, but I'm going to explain the question. Explain which civilization you think used geography to their advantage. Meaning, referring back to this, which one of these did you like the most? Did you think Mayans were smarter that they chose a rainforest? Do you think Incas were smarter because they chose mountains, better protection? Were Aztecs actually smarter because they knew how to make more land? Or was the Mississippians because they knew how to live closer to rivers and waters and grass? Okay, so you pick one and explain it. That does not mean you just highlight, copy, paste. I need you to start writing things in your own words. Explain. Which one would you choose? Once you do that, you may turn it in. Try to write more than a sentence. Okay, bye.